Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to share with you my updated plane designs. I made a guide about plane designs a couple of months ago. Some of those designs remain the same, but I have some updates for you. In addition to that, I will also share with you my strategic bombers and my naval bombers, which I never shared before. Now, for the early game, you need 3 researches done before you even think about making plane designs. You need the range improvements, the survivability studies, and the basic small airframe. Once those are done, we can start with my basic old fighter design. This is basically all you can get early in the game, so you go for the engine type 2 and a double module with 4 light machine guns. You also use the drop tanks to increase the range and armor plates to increase air defense, hence why we needed those researches. Now, with Germany, you have access to slightly better guns, so there is a version of this fighter which you can make only with Germany. And it would be this one. Now, it may be that some other nations have access to Cannon 1, but if you do, you can use this design, which has a bit more air attack compared to the other one. The rest is the same. In terms of CAS, you also have a couple of options. Now, for CAS, what matters the most is ground attack. So here you can see when on close air support, our ground attack is 14. And our air defense is 13. This is a more defense-oriented CAS, in which we use the bomb blocks instead of 2 small bomb bays. And we also use the dive brakes to increase our air defense when on close air support. If you feel like you want even more ground attack, but you don't care that much about the defense, you can go for this design instead. We give up dive brakes in exchange for a bit more ground attack. In the early game, you can also start making your naval bombers, and this is the best design for naval bombers. You need to use floats, and you use drop tanks for the extra range, and then all you need is the torpedo mountings to attack enemy boats. You can also switch the engine 2 to engine 1 if you want, but the extra speed is nice to have. At this point of the game, you can also make your basic carrier naval bomber, if you have carriers, of course. It's very similar to the naval bomber, but here we don't need any extra module. We just go for the torpedo mountings and the engine type 2 or type 1 if you want to save a bit in terms of production cost. One more thing about naval bombers is these don't change that much later in the game, so all you can do is you can keep the same basic modules and you can change from basic to improved to advanced as you unlock new airframes. Other than that, the naval bombers remain the same throughout the game. As we approach World War II, you want to have researched the engine type 3, the cannons 1, the heavy MG, and the improved small airframe. For our improved CAS design, there is another requirement. You need to have researched the 1940 anti-tank technology, this one, because we need to have access to the anti-tank cannon too. With those researches done, you can finally make your mid-game fighters. These fighters are much better than the previous ones, and they can last until the very late game. In fact, you don't really need to upgrade them. I will show you some upgrades, but these fighters remain very viable until the very late game. Now, there are a couple of versions of this fighter that I want to share with you. This is the one that works best for me. It's the one that I enjoyed the most using, and in terms of stats, for me it performs better than the other ones. So we go for 2 modules with 2 cannon ones and 4 heavy machine guns, a 4 heavy machine guns module. We need to use the engine 3 that we researched, we still use the drop tanks, and then you can either go for 2 armor plates or you can switch one of them for the self-sealing fuel tanks. The self-sealing fuel tanks are better, but they increase the rubber cost by 1, which is quite massive. Depending on which nation you play, you may not have access to rubber this early into the game. So depending on how much spare rubber you have, you may want to go for armor plates instead of self-sealing fuel tanks. Now, this design has more air attack and less agility. Now I will show you another design, this one, which has a bit less air attack, but it has more agility. In addition to that, the production cost is also about 5 cheaper than the other design. What are we doing for this one? Well, we replace the Cannon 2 for more heavy machine guns. So we only use 3 modules with 4 heavy machine guns each. The rest of the design is the same, including the fact that you can use the self-sealing fuel tanks instead of the armor plates. Now, according to many guides, this design is slightly more cost effective. So because of the lower production cost, in the end, it will be more cost effective. In my opinion, there is not a big difference between the two, and I like my cannon design a bit more. I think it remains more viable later into the game compared to this one. But that's entirely up to you. You can try them both and you can let me know which one works best for you. This is our upgraded cast design that we're going to use for World War II, and that will remain viable very late into the game. So as you can see, we use the anti-tank cannon 2 in addition to 2 modules with small bomb bays. We use the engine 3 and nothing else changed here. So we still use the dive brakes and the drop tanks for the extra range. What is important for this cast is of course the ground attack. So as you can see, when we are on close air support, the ground attack is 31, which is very good. In the mid-game, if you research the basic or the improved large airframe, you also have access to tactical bombers. This is my strategic bomber design. I must be honest with you, I never use this. I don't think that strategic bombing is worth it in general. But if you want to go for strategic bombing, then I would use a design like this. As you can see, the production cost is very high, but at the same time, the strategic bombing stat is fairly high as well. 76 strategic bombing is pretty good. Let's talk about the modules. We're using only the large bomb bays, as those are the only modules for strategic bombing available as module slots up here. We use the engine type 3. And then as for these ones, you may not have access to all of them at this point in the game. So depending on which ones you have available, use maybe the version number 1 of bomb sights and radio navigation 1 if you don't have access to radio navigation 2. And if you don't have access to any of them, you can also give up on them, as most of your strategic bombing comes from up here in any case. Those modules help with the night penalty, however, which can be useful for damaging more overnight as well. This strategic bomber doesn't really have upgrades. Again, you can change the airframe. You can start with the basic, change it into improved, advanced, and modern if you decide to go for them. I never research large airframes because, again, I don't find strategic bombing to be worth it. As we get into the late game, the main difference in terms of planes designs will be made by the jet engines. So you will want to have researched that jet engines. For that, you also need to research the experimental rockets and the guided missile. In addition to that, you also want to have researched the advanced small airframe, or even better, the modern small airframe, and also the cannons too, for additional guns. The first design that I will share with you is my advanced close air support CAS. This design is fairly good and it has better stats than the previous one. We get to a whopping 39-40 ground attack, and that is thanks to the fact that we are using the anti-tank cannon 2, 2 small bomb bays, and then another anti-tank cannon 1. As for the modules down here, we need to use the jet engine to support all this weight. We use the drop tanks for the extra range, we use the dive brakes for some extra defense, and we use the self-sealing fuel tanks for even more defense. At this point in the game, usually you have access to enough rubber, so this shouldn't be a problem anymore. For our fighter 2, the modules down here are exactly the same. So the same logics as for the CAS. As for the weapons, for the guns, we are going to use the cannon 2 modules, and then 1 module with 4 heavy machine guns. This gives us slightly more air attack than the previous model, especially if you went for my module, the cannon the cannon oriented one. The air attack is very similar, but with this advanced small airframe we still get a lot more agility, we get more range, and we get more max speed, so overall the design is better indeed. Even later into the game, you can upgrade the advanced close air support to modern, and this will basically give you more range and more maximum speed. Definitely not a priority upgrading to this one, it's very similar to the previous one. For the endgame fighter, this is more of a meme design, I must say. That being said, this is very effective. I tried it and it does disintegrate enemy planes. Surely it is not very cost effective. As you can see, the production cost is insane, and that is because I went for 2 jet engines. This was the only way to get some stats to significantly improve compared to the previous module. Otherwise, I assume you can also use the previous module with a more modern small airframe for just extra range and speed. Although, you know, 96 air attack is pretty cool to see, so Okay guys, that's all for today's guide. Please feel free to share your opinion in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with me or what would you change about these designs. Other than that, of course, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.